Hey everybody, it's Honey Heart Allison here, and it is Tuesday, and I have to admit, I'm a little bit of a hot mess today. A little bit under the weather, and so I'm a bit of a just I don't know. This is as good as it gets today. So if you are tuning in today live, I'm with a very special guest, and we are opening the conversation around compassionate care and caregiving. And my guest, Kate Chapman, welcome. Yeah. Kate is a Broadway performer and she's also a life coach. And she's also the star of Little Kate on the Prairie YouTube series. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you so much for having me, Allison. It's a pleasure. And I think you look beautiful as always.
Oh, thanks. Even though I'm sweating and just, that sweaty feeling when you're sick.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just pull up Facebook here and make sure I don't miss anyone's comments if they are tuning in today. How you doing there? And you're in Colorado, right?
Yeah, I'm on, excuse me. I'm in Eastern Colorado, and the weather out here is something amazing. We watch it roll in, and then it's very ferocious for a few minutes, and then it goes away. And right now, today, we have thunderstorms happening, and so
Oh.
that'll mean a rainbow before sunset. I don't know.
Oh, that'll be nice. Yeah. I do love that about storms, especially living here at the beach. As soon as I see that dark and then the light, I look out the window because it's always on one side, the rainbow. And yeah, so okay, I've got us here live and we are good. So if you are watching, you're welcome to comment. Let us know where you're watching from. Kate has been a caregiver. I am personally a caregiver myself, and we're opening the conversation to talk about the challenges and also, the good things that can come along with compassionate caregiving. So, Kate, tell us a little bit about your uncle. You were his primary caregiver with his journey with Parkinson's and Lewy body dementia. So tell us a little bit about how that started and what that was like for you and for him.
It was something that kind of rolled out over time. My father passed away, and I was his caregiver along with my mother and my sister at the end of his life, just for a few weeks. And his younger brother had dementia or had Parkinson's, and we knew the dementia was probably coming, and we knew that he was going to need increased care.
Mm.
And over time, I just started monitoring things, and then one fateful night, he made a mistake with the stove.
Oh, yeah.
And nothing major happened, but it really shook him up. And so I decided then that it was time to think about assessing where he was and finding out what he needed. And when I arrived, it kind of ended up that I had to stay because there just wasn't help to be hired.
Yeah.
And that's such a hard thing to come to grips with sometimes, that as a culture in the United States, especially, we are just not set up to have people around to do that. If you hire agencies, it's very expensive and they're not paying the caregivers very much money. So you're not getting amazing caregivers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Here in Canada, private care there's one really, just to sort of interrupt you, but subsidized care is government care, which may not be the best conditions, but private care is just astronomically expensive. $10,000 a month some places. So yeah, it's quite a challenge for families. Absolutely.
yeah, it's an interesting puzzle, and I don't think we're handling it very well. People, quite honestly, do much better if they stay in their homes. They have a better quality of life. They have less falls, less infections, less sores that go untreated. And that's not to say that care facilities aren't doing their best, but it's a lot of patience, and I will say that my uncle definitely needed one-on-one care at all times,
Yeah.
um, especially as things went along. But it's interesting that we haven't figured out a way to take government dollars and put them to the people, because there are a lot of people that would like to be caregiving, especially for family members. And if that money could go into the family instead of going into, some random person, that would be a better idea. So I
Yeah.
think there are solutions to be had. Nobody's talking about enough of them, I don't think.
That's an interesting topic. I like that because I was just the moment you said that, having a fund for caregivers, because as a caregiver myself, the only one who's here physically that's stepped up to the plate, my brothers aren't really interested for their own reasons, and not to say that that's wrong, but there's no compensation, and it's very time consuming and emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, right? So yeah, I think that's a great idea, great creative idea. If there was a national caregiving fund to support families, and I think there's different. I mean, in Canada, I think there's a few different things, but there's quite a different requirements you have to meet. Like somebody has to be at their end of life to get sort of compensation for being off work to caregive. So because it's such a long, can be a lengthy process, caregiving, how did you how did you manage the grief and the stress and the overwhelm that comes with compassion fatigue?
Um, Constant creative response. It's what
And
I
what
kept
does that mean?
it's what I kept saying to myself over and over and over again. Whatever came to me, I tried to meet it with a creative response.
Hmm.
If I walked into my uncle's room and my uncle was a car
Tell
a
Yeah,
store.
tell us about him. Yeah.
He was a really fascinating guy, and I learned so much about him. But he restored old automobiles, and he had
Mm.
a collection of cars ranging from 1899 up through, I think he had a 66 Cadillac or something like that. But that was a modern car. Um, but he had dementia, so sometimes when I would enter his room in the morning, the brain wasn't quite firing on all of the cylinders that might make sense to you or me. And so one morning I came in, and he said, "It's everywhere." I said, "What? You don't see it?" I would like to know what you're seeing. The Chevy. It's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Oh.
It's a Chevy. Yeah. It's Tom's Chevy. He brought it up here. Did he bring it up here in pieces, or is it all together? In pieces. You don't see the pieces?
Yeah.
Is it not here?
Yeah.
I believe you see that it's here.
Yeah.
So my creative response in that moment was just to have an improv scene with the man,
Mm.
which the rules of improv are yes and. I never denied his experience. I never said it wasn't happening. I just asked him questions for him to give me a fuller picture of what the scene was that we were in.
Mm.
There was a billboard that was right outside of my uncle's window. And when I first arrived to assess how he was, and to, kind of see what care he needed, there was a car ad there. And the way that his house was situated, the billboard just sort of stared into his into his living room, and I found it very loud.
Yeah.
Like just like
Yeah. Bam. Right there.
it just was a lot for me.
Yeah.
And I left for a while, and I had a cousin and his wife who were caring for my uncle at first, and then um, when I came back to do the long stint that I did, the billboard said for hire.
Mm.
Put your ad here. And I thought, how much can that billboard be? And I had some friends that I discussed it with. And I had one friend in particular that was like, you need to put your art up there. And so it became this kind of crowd-funded little thing where
Aw.
it wasn't much money to rent the billboard really. And so the first 6 months I was there, the billboard said love, and it
Aw.
was a piece of art that I had created. And then after that, I switched it to say be kind.
I love that. And you showed me the pictures. I wish I had them on my desktop right now, but I don't. And there was like little bees, and that's so sweet. And how did he react to seeing that?
My, he, he was not impressed.
Oh,
I did them more for me, I would say,
yeah,
than for him. The
yeah.
creating the pieces of the art were a meditation for me of
Mm,
fact that I was there to love him and love my family, some of whom I hadn't seen in decades and are very different than I am,
mm.
and responded to the situation in ways that made it difficult for me sometimes. And so it was a reminder to me that if I led with love, then I could avoid as much conflict and diminishment for my uncle as possible. I didn't want there to be a war happening around him. I wanted it to be a very peaceful situation. And we had a lot of very strong personalities at play, mine included. So that reminder was there for a while. And then after I sort of mastered the love part, I realized that sometimes just love isn't enough. I could love these people, but I wasn't necessarily being as kind as I wanted to be.
Mm.
And so I it was, there were moments where I had to take a breath and remind myself that leading with kindness may seem harder, but it matters more, and it carries so much more healing to it. Um, so they were really notes to me.
I love that, the creative response and leading with love and kindness, because you're right, it does seem challenging at first, and it doesn't stop the triggers or the emotional overwhelm sometimes, but having an outlet, like you said, that creating the art was like meditation, and then visually seeing it every day, almost like an affirmation, um, helps us choose in the moment, okay, how can I respond with kindness that honors another family member, or the patient, so to speak, and the caregiver. And I have found myself in those situations where if I can choose a place of sort of neutrality and that may honor someone else's opinion and my experience, then it does allow for those relationships to continue, like you said, and there's healing, or it just is really much more of an honoring response. And yeah, so if you guys are watching and you have any questions, if you are also a caregiver and are maybe facing some challenges, definitely comment below. Let us know where you're from. Kate is a life coach. I am a grief coach. And between the two of us, there's skills and tips and things. And the creative response, I really want to talk more about that, because when you and I first connected, I'd never heard that before. And I found that I didn't know that I was doing it, but that's exactly how I've been responding to a lot of stress, especially with the last year. And then the Alzheimer's of my mom is, progressing a little more, a little more. And I have found lots of different creative ways to keep us smiling and to be grateful. And so, yeah, just tell me a little more of your experience and your journey, and anything you want people to know that are watching and listening, if they're dealing with it too.
So one of the first things that I noticed about myself as a caregiver is that, you know, I would say I was probably a classic codependent, right? Like I'm just in there and I'm going to help it, I'm going to fix it.
Mm,
Um, and that doesn't work. it First of all, it's a dance between you and who you're caring for, and
yeah.
it's important to know who's leading and why. And there were times where he needed to lead the dance. It needed
Mm,
to be him all the way.
yeah.
Then there were moments where I definitely was leading, and if he wasn't following me, he needed to sit down because we needed he needed to follow me.
Yeah.
And so that became a really interesting, um, thing to discover, and I had discovered it with my father as well when I was caring for him in the last, couple weeks. That was also a dance where I needed to know when to to not lead just because I'm the stronger, healthier person and I have the louder voice.
Mm,
Sometimes that's not the best thing to happen. End of life is a really precious time, and it's important to allow the person who's in it to have their journey with as much space held around them for what that looks like, but not trying to change it for them.
yeah.
I got a lot of people saying, you should do this, you should do this, you should have your uncle enrolled in this, you could you get him to do this. He didn't want to do any of that. And I couldn't want it for him more than he wanted it for himself.
Yeah.
And I couldn't repair the things emotionally that weren't allowing him to want it for himself. I came to the party just as someone to help him enjoy what he had left as much as he could,
Mm,
but not to talk him into a different end.
yeah. That's really important. And I'm so sorry for all of the losses that you've experienced. And I'm really proud of you to sit here today and share your story. I don't often find there's a lot of conversation around this, or at least I haven't been exposed to it. And so I appreciate you taking the time to share. It's I echo some of that is the learning in the last year. And trust me, have you had an emotional breakdown caregiving? I have.
I had
But
several. I had several.
yeah, so, but it's not a bad thing. What it has taught me or is teaching me is how to embody unconditional love, to be an example of it, regardless of all the other family crap or drama or other people's choices or decisions or opinions, right? Um, and and it's her journey. You're right. Like her journey is not my journey. I'm there to make it a little more comfortable and to give her honor and do the best so that she's taken care of. She gave me the gift of life. Your uncle is part of your family. Um, so at the end of the day, it's like those things don't really matter. You said it in the beginning actually really well. You said um, that struck a chord with me was now I lost the train of thought. I'm sorry.
That's
I'm a
okay.
little low energy people today. I'm sorry. But we are here and it yeah.
You just to speak to sort of like the different players in the game too, I think, um, hmm, everybody shows up for their own reasons, and some of those reasons are gonna help the process, and some of those reasons are really gonna hinder the process. And the same person that might be a big helper also may be your biggest stumbling block.
Yeah.
And so that was an interesting thing too, to be able to hold both of those things in my heart, was that the person that was showing up And really, when I called and was there, was also the person that was making me have emotional breakdowns.
The polarity. Oh my goodness.
Right? The
Yeah.
polarity is everywhere, and I think that's the hardest thing about caregiving is you're constantly going from the world of the person who's in decline, and that world gets smaller and smaller and smaller,
Yes.
and it
Yes.
needs to. And
Yeah.
and then you're swinging back the other way to the world of the living, which is buzzing and fast and moving. And it's sort of been interesting during COVID because a lot of the things that my clients are saying are the things that I experienced during that year plus where I was with my uncle. Um, the isolation, the
Mhm.
questioning the life that you'd lived before and do I want to continue that after? Um, just the strangeness of going out into the real world again and being with people. And
After being shrunken in isolation, yeah, the world got smaller and smaller, and now, oh, and you kinda have this you're bracing for the next.
yeah.
Yeah.
And in my case, and in many caregivers' cases, it wasn't like I just cocooned with my uncle and I was in there with him and I was having this. No, I had responsibilities and jobs and contracts and things that I had to organize and do. And so I would need to leave him for a couple of weeks every once in a while to go do that. And other family members would come in and care for him for a while. And over time, every family member got burnt out, and we ended up hiring outside people, who were wonderful, and just I'm so grateful for them being there and being amazing like they were. Um, but it is that constant. I mean, if people can kind of think about what it would have been like to go into COVID out, and just
Yeah,
do as much as people are tired of being inside, the back and forth of it, it's hard on your nervous system.
yeah,
And I think many caregivers have that experience of, wouldn't it be nice if we just had the ability to just cocoon with our loved ones and have that beautiful time with them, really just allowing them the space and the safety to leave this world.
yeah. It was so beautiful. I'm learning more about that and the honor it is to be at someone's end of life, and even if we don't know when that's coming, I'm actually taking the training for to be an end of life doula, and just as a caregiver, really, and it's something I never planned for or ever thought would go down that path, but, you know, I feel like if we can't be there for each other when things get tough or someone needs help, then what is the purpose? And so it is challenging, and we need each other. We need to support each other. We need to hold that space. And then, you know, then there's trained individuals that can come in if a family can afford it, right? I think of compassion fatigue being something that is causing burnout in so many people. And the extraneous pressure of a pandemic world, on top of that, people haven't been able to see their loved ones if they are in care homes for a very long time. And it almost becomes a little too much. And what is your best strategy? I know you've talked about the creative response, but in terms of compassionate self-care, that's a huge thing that has to be practiced along with being a caregiver. And so what are really your loving, compassionate self-care techniques that you use to keep yourself healthy and balanced?
Well, I don't know that I stayed either healthy or balanced. I don't know. I don't think that was true. I
Well,
put
there you go. There's an honest reply. I
yeah,
mean,
I
I've
put
struggled at times too. Yeah.
I put on some weight because my normal way of exercising is to walk miles and miles and miles a day. Suddenly, I'm in an apartment where I'm walking from the kitchen to his bedroom to the bathroom. That's my triangle, right?
Mm,
There's no time for me to go and do that because I've got
yeah.
essentially a very large toddler that I'm taking care of, and I don't mean that in a
Yeah.
disrespectful way. I mean that,
Yeah.
that was the reasoning of the individual that I'm dealing with. Like, just he'd fling his body across the room, not thinking of the repercussions, right? He'd forgotten that falling can hurt. So, those are the things that are just so absurd that you come up on that, they're just, sorry, because I just went back to just seeing him in just different
Yeah.
where, he was doing that. But so what I did is I tried to, and then also in my real life, I sing to care for myself. And
Yeah.
my uncle couldn't stand the sound of the human singing voice. He very much enjoyed instrumental music, but in like vocal music, he had a very big injury from his elementary music teacher, bad music teacher. Um,
Aw.
yeah, he and another of my uncle both had the same injury, so I know it was deep and real because both of them just the sound of the human voice, not good. Anyway, so here I am, a person that's made my livelihood singing for many, many years, um, along with the other side gigs that I do to support that. But singing's been my like my heart thing that I follow.
Mm.
And I couldn't sing without irritating the man that I'm trying to soothe and care for.
Ba-dum-bum. Oh, go figure, right?
Right? That's an interesting thing to come across.
Yeah.
So I would try to add in little things here and there, and I would do them for a while and see if I liked them, see how they worked with how he was with his
Mhm.
changing space of physical and emotional and mental needs. So I would do things like I would dance in my room in the morning. Sometimes when he was having breakfast, that would give me, kind of 7 or 8 minutes that I could kind of just get my heart rate up a little bit and get myself moving. I started doing a more kind of focused meditation practice at night, though, right before I would go to sleep. And quite honestly,
Yeah.
it would put me to sleep, but it would put me into a nice deep sleep.
Good, yeah.
I started drinking a lot of herbal tea. Very soothing, good for me, no
Yeah.
calories.
Yeah.
I started reading poetry out loud.
Oh,
There was just something about saying the things out loud that certain times, and it breaks my heart right now, even Allison,
mm,
certain words would just allow me to release.
yeah.
And I was so grateful because I just needed a release. Like I wasn't depressed. I wasn't really even overwhelmed. It's a lot holding space all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a lot
Mm,
um choosing uh choosing what needs of mine to put aside, you know,
mm,
like the
mm.
singing, like the fact that I love to soak in a bath. And
Yeah.
that was not going to be an option, not only for time, but also he didn't have a bathtub where we could do that. And he and I
Yeah.
shared one bathroom.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and as he got, kind of just on different days, like he didn't respect boundaries of closed doors.
Yeah. Yeah, or they don't, I find sometimes they just don't know, they don't remember what's behind that door, and, there's a lot of sacrifice in, yeah, holding space, and there does have to be release, and I'm glad that you found a way to do that through those beautiful artistic outlets, I would say.
I
Mm.
also took on the task of keeping track of the days in just a kind of a clinical fashion. So I would write what time he got up in the morning, how his mental state was, if
Mm.
he requested something for breakfast, what I served him for breakfast. Um, kind of I would write down breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Those were the things of joy in his life, and I tried to make those as joyful as possible, which allowed me to focus on he and I ate very different food. He ate only 4 ingredients.
Well, that would have made it a little bit easier, but still.
No, no, because
No.
I want variety, and there's 4 ingredients, so there's only so much I can do, but so we had very different food, but as I tried to stay very creative with what I was feeding him so that he was happy about it and enjoying it, um, it made me think about my own food and what do I want to have my own food be like for my
Yeah,
joy, creativity,
yeah,
and I started to focus on that more than I had, and I'd kind of forgotten about that for a little while. So I kind of reconnected with that idea, which was good.
yeah.
Yeah, so those journals are interesting. I look back on them, and um, there are things I don't remember happening because
Mhm.
you're in it and you're tired,
Yeah,
and so it's lovely to have that, and I think too it helped me to detach a little bit from the parts of my heart that were breaking because I got clinical for a couple of seconds.
yeah,
And it's just about the time. How does he feel? What was his blood sugar? What did he eat? Just like a real nurse, quote unquote, would do.
yeah, and then it's like the structure becomes something that you can identify with because literally everything else is slowly, like, falling apart. That's literally what it's like with dementia, Alzheimer's, or progressive illness that he experienced, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad that gives you some comfort and you kept those journals, to look back on. For myself, I'm documenting a lot with pictures and, just keeping my mom's nickname is Smiley, so keeping Smiley smiling. We found actually I cooked fish and chips the other night. I take her grocery shopping every week, and we found smiley fries. They look like little smiley faces.
I've seen those. They're adorable. I'm so
I
glad.
was like, you should have seen her face. Her face was like, "Oh my god," and she was just smiling and laughing, and that's what it's about. It's not complicated, and so, that helps both the caregiver and the caregiveree or the other person, right?
Yeah.
Um, because that's replenishing emotion, and it's regenerating, and it really does take a bit of ease off. But, yeah, having that structure, we have a structure on Thursdays, and, I gotta stick to it. So she knows it too now. She's gotten used to it, yeah, which is hard for that new information to stick, as you know. But, so Kate Chapman, if you haven't seen her Facebook page, I wanna share with you guys Kate Chapman Health. This is her page. Go on there and like her and follow her. She's an amazing life coach and speaker. And she has some really great videos. She is the star of Little Kate on the Prairie. How many acres do you live on again, Kate?
40.
Oh my gosh. Right. And it's all flat, right? Where you are in Colorado?
Yeah,
Or
I mean, it looks flat, but when you walk it, it's a little hilly. But we're at 6,500 feet, and so we're high up, but yeah, it's definitely prairie.
So go on there, follow Kate, watch her videos, and if you have any questions for us, we'll be on just a little bit longer. But oops, here we go. Kate, what else do you want to share with people about your caregiving experience that could help them in the moment right now or on the journey ahead, the road ahead?
All right, so I can only speak about the United States. Um, I just had a client the other day who is caring for parents who are declining.
We do have a question, so why don't
Oh,
you hold that thought? Hey, Monica, thanks for watching. Wonder if you've ever been on the receiving end of needing a caregiver, and if not, how would you suppose how you would feel? This is true.
Okay, Monica, here's the answer. I was a very sick kid. So I needed to receive care a lot. I had a lot of I had ulcerative colitis from a young age, and if you don't know what that is, it can be very painful and debilitating. And
Mm.
they didn't know anything about it, and so I had a lot of examinations. And so I had caregivers, and I experienced the ones that saw me as a human with fears and anxieties and trepidation, and I experienced the ones who I felt like a piece of meat with. And
Mm, mhm,
that's from family members through to paid practitioners. You can feel that way with both sides. And
mhm,
finally, when I was in my late 30s, I found all sorts of ways to take care of myself that just made me feel better. I'm also a health coach, so I work with people on how to, reverse things naturally through your own um, intuition, basically. So I tried to do for my uncle and my father the things that I responded to when I needed care.
mm, mhm. And that's a good perspective. For myself, if I were to answer that question, Monica, I have I have been in situations where I have needed help. I had lung surgery in, gosh, 14 years ago. I had a spontaneous lung collapse 3 times. There was nothing to cause it, and at one point, they would only discharge me from the hospital if I had a 24/7 caregiver, and I lived alone. My cat couldn't take care of me. My dad had to work, and it was just such a stressful time. So being in a position, or even I broke my ankle a couple years ago, and I couldn't even, like, I couldn't walk, and I had to get up and down the stairs to my house and go to work. And so on the other end, the other perspective, it is hard for people to feel like they're losing their independence. Absolutely. It's challenging on both ends. It's heartbreaking to watch, see their world get smaller and smaller, especially when you know it's not going to expand from dementia or Alzheimer's, but or something else that is moving towards the end of life. Now, if it's something that's treatable and eventually you're going to get better, like a broken ankle, for example, um, I feel like this emotions are the same on both ends of the spectrum, and it's learning how to soften into the present moment. I know, Kate, you mentioned it, is in that moment, your response to XYZ when he was having the hallucinations. Um, it's really learning to tap into and be in that moment as best that you can, whether you're on the receiving end and you're miserable because you don't want someone to help you because you're afraid of losing that bit of independence, or what you're facing is difficult and it's challenging. So yeah, I hope that, I mean, that's just my perspective, and that's your perspective too, Kate. And I thank you for sharing. That's a good question, Monica. I appreciate that. Um, yeah, so I cut you off there. So you were going to tell a story of, I think it was a current client. But anyways, the question I think was, let me see if I remember.
No,
Trying to keep my energy up.
I know where we were. No, just the navigating what you need to do is so difficult in the beginning and the middle and the end, because it
Mm,
constantly changes and there aren't very many services or helpful answers. And every state
mm,
has different rules for things. Every town has different services, different things that it can provide. My advice, though, is to keep staying open to the possibilities that are in front of you and to not get discouraged, even though it feels horrible. Uh, I have watched a number of times that the solution appears when it needs to. And none of the solutions are easy or really enjoyable. Most of them are hard, but they do appear when you just kind of relax into it and surrender to, I don't know what else to do. I've tried everything.
Yeah.
Um, so I think, just don't give up hope. And yet hope's a dicey thing because it's like, it's not about hoping that your loved one is going to pull out of it. It's not about hoping that um, it's going to be shorter or quicker or, whatever you're hoping. I don't, like those kind of things. It's more about, um, it's so funny when the thought dances away,
I
that,
know, and I'm thinking about it too because I actually have experienced the same thing where I'm at the end of my rope, which is the end of your belief that something could be different or help could come or whatever the situation, something could change, and then it does. After I've had a triggering emotional reaction to it, like why did it have to happen like that? But if maybe I had softened into it, it would have been much more enjoyable when it did show up. But I think you're right too. The systems that we deal with, the governments, the different rules and regulations everywhere, and it is very challenging. And for so many people that are apart from their families and don't have that network, and this is why I think it's an important conversation to know that you're not alone and you matter and your loved ones matter, and you know we're sharing our experience with you to give you that little bit of hope um, that you won't suffer. um, you don't have to suffer alone. There's different resources for caregivers as well as resources for the person that needs the care. And so Monica says, during periods of caregiving, I developed my assertive communication skills, one of my biggest lessons. Yeah,
yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I definitely um, learned how to kind of get to the point with a lot of different things. And
yeah.
um, I also found that my uncle never liked to be called uncle. So it's not like I called him uncle ever because we only did it just to irritate him when we were kids. Um, so when I went to care for him, I had the dilemma of what am I going to call him because it didn't feel right to just use his first name because it didn't. But uncle wasn't right either because he didn't like that. So I just, sir just felt right to me. And
Hmm,
so when I talked to sir, it was about the fact that I was there as his caregiver. And so we're going to communicate as clearly as possible.
yeah.
Um, there were other times he was dude sometimes when he was really acting out. I'd be like, dude, that is not what we're gonna do today, Be like,
Yeah.
don't call me dude. I was like, then don't act like this. you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he also another one was old man. That was when he was just really just not even functioning like the dude, just really,
Mm,
not having a good day. Uh, and he called me goofy, you know. He kind of couldn't remember my name a lot of times, but goofy he could remember. And so I think too, if you have a hard time communicating with your loved one, and sometimes it's difficult, there's
yeah.
a lot of relationship things that come into play that you never would imagine. Um,
And especially with Alzheimer's dementia, the communication skills, are going. And so assertive also means like clear, concise, and short, like instructions. Because you can't use reason or logic sometimes, most of the time, all the
Yeah,
time.
less and less, right?
Yeah,
Like the thing that you could reason through the day before, you can't do the next day. And I
yeah,
was a nanny for a long time when I first moved to New York City as a young actress. It was a way to go on auditions and make my money. And with toddlers, you're reasoning with them every day to teach them reason. And so
yeah,
each day they hold on to a little piece of it, and it's fascinating to watch them build reason for themselves.
mhm.
It's also kind of fascinating to watch the reason go away
Yeah, it's the opposite effect. Yeah,
and to understand that my part is not to hold on to needing to have him have reason. He didn't have it anymore. So I
yeah,
needed to not need him to reason through it. I just needed to keep him in a situation where he was okay without it.
yeah, absolutely. Monica, sorry, I had to clarify. She says, I personally meant for assistance for help. I think for yourself. Yeah,
What? And yeah, and I agree with that too.
absolutely. Yeah,
Absolutely. And sometimes even then it's hard to get what you need. And so you keep honing it. My father was amazing at that. My father had been in and out of hospitals since I was a baby. He had multiple open heart surgeries, and then in the end, he had multiple myeloma, which is a bone marrow cancer. And when I was with him in the last month at the hospital, he had shtick that he'd worked out with the right?
yeah,
Like, and so he had like his whole patter, his whole banter. He had the things that would loosen the tension, the ones that would brighten their day. Um, and it was fascinating when he came across a practitioner that he really couldn't get what he needed from.
yeah,
Because he also knew to abandon hope when those were the people in front of him. Because if they didn't respond to his shtick in a certain manner of ways, he knew they weren't there for him in the way that he was going to need it.
mm,
So he learned to kind of disengage and wait for the next person. So he learned a lot of patience, and I do think as a patient, you do learn a lot of patience in the
yeah,
caregivers. Um, and it's hard to be a caregiver. It's hard to know what someone needs. It's hard when you're sick to know what you need. I would go in my uncle's room every morning. I'd say, "How you doing this morning, sir?" And he'd say, "I feel all right.
mm,
Would you like to get up and walk around?" "No, I don't think so."
yeah,
You feel all right, but completely not all right, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's challenging, and that brought me back to a memory of being in the hospital, and I wasn't allowed to drink water. They were starving me because I was on, like, the surgery wait list, like, just waiting in emergency, like, um, and I had nothing. I could do nothing but lay there. I was in so much pain, and I had so many drugs going through me for that, and I couldn't even have a drink of water or go to the bathroom because I had been transferred from another hospital, and so they quarantine you, and that was a long time ago. But yeah, being in that position, it's challenging, and that's where, yeah, clear communication, concise, is helpful for both people, both parties. Um, well, Kate, I think this has been a really great conversation. Thank you for sharing, and I can feel the love, coming from you of that you have for your family, and that you did the tough thing. You did the tough thing. I'm not gonna lie, and it takes a lot. So thank you for your courage. And is there anything else you want to share with us today?
Um, you know, just that, yeah, it was a tough decision to sign on to do it, but I'll never be sorry, ever.
Yeah.
Uh, in my father's case, we had a distant relationship that then he finally saw me as who I am in the last couple of days, and his
Mm.
last words to me were, "Thank you." And I can't
Oh,
ever undo that. That is what I carry, and it undoes, a lot of other things that happened before that needed to be undone. So because I showed up, I got that gift, and that gift is huge.
Yeah.
There are so many moments that I had with my uncle that I will cherish forever. Just
Yeah.
these private little things that they're just between the 2 of us. It was its own beautiful intimacy that I had never expected to be a part of my life,
Mm.
and I will never be sorry that I did ever for a second. So, what I would say is if you feel that you can't find a way, if if you have it even just a little bit in your heart, like, maybe do it. You'll be so glad that you showed up for that person, and you'll be so
Mm.
glad how you will end up showing up for yourself through it.
Oh, that's so eloquent. It's so beautifully said. And I hope that touches the people that needed to hear that today, or if you're watching the replay later. And just a reminder, Kate, follow Kate on her Facebook page. She's amazing, and I am so glad we've connected. And her YouTube channel, she's got some great cheerful. If you want a little humor, a little this, little that. And actually, she does a little bit of singing sometimes on her page, right? Or in the videos.
Yeah, there's a bunch of singing, actually. We just did a couple of live concerts. I had a friend here that's a pianist, and I made him sit down and play for me. So we
That
put
was awesome. Yeah, I watched that.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Allison, for your work and the beauty and the love that you're putting out in the world and the way that you show up. It's inspiring, and I am also so glad to have connected with you. Such a gift.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And for anyone tuning in, if you hit the sign up button at the top of my page, I am coming out with some mindful grief workshops this summer that are outdoors if you live locally where I am in British Columbia, or in the fall, I'm going to be transferring some online courses on there around compassionate care, how to manage compassion fatigue through mindful movement. Some meditations are coming out for self-care. So there's lots of stuff I'm going to be releasing over the next few months. And if that interests you, I invite you to join and subscribe to my hive, and be a part of the Honey Heart Collective family. And so that's just the sign up button at the top of the Facebook page. Um, Kate, thank you, and be blessed. Ah,
Thank
ah.
thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.